Nina is sitting in a 24-hour diner, the same one she used to work at, but she is at a table in the back, wearing Jawa's blood-crusted jacket. The waitress approaches, asking if she wants coffee. Nina doesn't answer. She is staring at the signet ring on the table. It's the key to his offshore accounts, his authority, his life. She has the exit ticket. She stands up, leaves the coffee money, and walks out, not toward the bus station, but toward the Vipers headquarters. Jawa is being tortured in the penthouse of the Vipers skyscraper. They aren't killing him yet, they are breaking him to sign over the territory. Nina realizes she cannot outshoot the Mafia, but she can outsmart them. She uses the ring to access Jawa's ghost fund, a stockpile of blackmail material on every crime lord in the city. She becomes the broker of destruction. The shipyard office was freezing, smelling of salt water and diesel. Nina sat on a metal folding chair, surrounded by 4 men who looked like they carved granite for a living. Lev, the leader of the local Waitress, leaned back in his leather chair. He was smoking a thin cigar, looking at Nina with amused contempt. The waitress, he laughed, smoke drifting toward the rusting ceiling fans. The one from the TV. You are very popular, Dutchka. The Vipers have a price on your head. 500,000. Why should I not cut your throat right now and collect? Nina didn't flinch. She placed her hand on the metal table. The heavy gold signet ring on her thumb clanked against the surface. The intricate tiger engraving caught the harsh overhead light. Lev's smile vanished. He sat up slowly. Where did you get that? It doesn't matter where I got it, Nina said, her voice stripping away the customer service warmth she had practiced for a decade. It was cold now. Flat. It matters what it opens. She slid a tablet across the table. Jawa didn't just hoard money. He hoarded insurance. That screen shows the ledger of every bribe the Vipers have paid to the Port Authority this year. It also shows the accounts where they have been skimming 10% off your shipments, Leviticus. Lev stared at the screen. He scrolled down, his eyes narrowing as he read the numbers. The amusement in the room evaporated, replaced by a dense, violent tension. You are giving me this? He asked, looking up at her. I'm paying you with it, Nina corrected. I don't want the money. I want the muscle. You want to hit the Vipers. I want to burn them, Nina said. I need a breach team. Heavy weapons. We hit their tower tonight. Lev looked at his lieutenant, then back at the ring on Nina's thumb. It was a king's crown worn by a pauper, but the authority was real. If this data is fake, Lev said, his voice low and dangerous, I will sell you to them in pieces. If it's fake, you can kill me yourself, Nina said, locking eyes with him. But if it's real, you get the pot back. And I get the man they took. Lev closed the tablet. He crushed his cigar out on the table. Get the rifles, he backed at his men. He looked at Nina. We move in an hour. Nina didn't smile. She didn't say thank you. She just checked the safety on the pistol she had tucked into her waistband. She wasn't asking for help anymore, she was hiring employees. The building shuddered. A dull, booming concussion from the lobby reverberated up the steel spine of the skyscraper, followed immediately by the staccato rhythm of automatic gunfire. Lev and his Russians had made their introduction. Nina stood alone in the service elevator, watching the numbers climb. Her hands were empty. She had left the pistol in the van. The only thing she wore was the oversized grey hoodie and the heavy gold ring on her thumb. The elevator chimed at the 40th floor. The doors slid open. 4 men in suits were waiting, MP5 submachine guns raised and leveled at her chest. Behind them, the double doors to the penthouse were guarded by 2 more. "Freeze," the lead guard screamed, his finger whitening on the trigger. Nina didn't freeze. She stepped out, her hands held loosely at her sides, palms open. She walked straight toward the barrel of the nearest gun. "Stop walking or I drop you." "Go ahead," Nina said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the tension like a razor. She held up her phone, the screen glowing with a countdown timer. 4:58, 4:57. "This phone is linked to a cloud server," she lied, her eyes locking on the guard's sweaty face. "It requires a biometric check-in every 5 minutes. If my heart stops, or if I don't scan my thumb, the entire Viper financial history is emailed to the FBI, the IRS, and the DA." The guard hesitated. The gun barrel dipped an inch. Nina raised her hand, flashing the heavy gold signet ring. The tiger caught the light. The guards recognized it instantly. It was the seal of the throne. "I'm not here to fight," Nina said, lowering her hand. "I'm here to negotiate the surrender. Tell me the bank is open." The guards exchanged panicked glances. The building was shaking from the battle downstairs. Their comms were screaming with reports of Russian mercenaries. And here was a woman wearing the king's ring, threatening to burn their entire lives down with an email. Confusion is the most powerful weapon in a siege. "Check her for wires," the lead guard muttered, lowering his weapon completely. "Let her through." They patted her down, finding nothing but skin and bone. The guard at the double doors keyed his headset, spoke a few harsh words, and then nodded. He swiped a keycard. The heavy oak doors to the penthouse clicked unlocked. Nina didn't exhale. She stepped past the men with guns, pushed the doors open, and walked into the lion's den. The penthouse smelled of expensive leather and raw meat. In the center of the room, on a plastic tarp spread over the Persian rug, sat a wooden chair. Jewa was bound to it with zip ties. His head hung low. His shirt was gone, revealing a torso that was a map of fresh violence, burns, cuts, and bruises blooming like dark flowers. Min stood by the wet bar, pouring a drink. He looked at Nina with a mixture of curiosity and pity. "He hasn't spoken in an hour. You're welcome to try." Nina ignored him. She walked across the tarp, her boot sticky on the plastic. She knelt in front of the chair. "Jewa." He flinched. He lifted his head slowly, one eye swollen shut, the other bloodshot and unfocused. When he saw her, a sob broke from his throat, a sound of pure devastation. "No," he rasped, struggling against the ties. "Why? Why did you come back? You were free." "I wasn't free," Nina said, reaching into her pocket for the folding knife. She saw through the plastic ties on his wrist. "I was just alone." "You are going to die here," he wept, his hands falling limp. He slumped forward, defeated. The torture had broken the shell, the man inside was leaking out. I can't protect you anymore. Leave me. Please. Just run." Nina looked at the broken man. She looked at Min, who was watching with a smirk. She felt the heavy gold ring on her thumb. She didn't hug him. She didn't comfort him. She reared back and slapped him across the face with everything she had. The sound cracked like a gunshot. Min stopped drinking. Jewa's head snapped to the side. He froze. The weeping stopped. "Look at me," Nina commanded, her voice dropping an octave. She grabbed his chin and forced his face toward hers. "I didn't burn my life down to watch you quit. I didn't walk past 6 men with guns to hear you beg." She stood up, towering over him. She pointed to the door. "Stand up, Jewa. We are leaving." Jawa stared up at her. He saw the shaved head, the cold eyes, the ring on her hand. He saw the reflection of his own brutality in the woman he had tried to save. Something clicked behind his eyes. The pupil of his good eye contracted. The slump in his shoulders vanished, replaced by a rigid, terrifying tension. The pain was still there, but he shoved it into a box and locked the lid. He gripped the arms of the chair. His knuckles turned white. Slowly, painfully, the king stood up. He didn't look at Nina. He looked past her, directly at Min. "You should have killed me while I was sitting down," Jawa whispered. The double doors burst open. Lev's team, 4 men in tactical gear, stormed in, weapons raised. "Secure the target," the lead mercenary shouted, aiming his rifle at Min. Min didn't flinch. He stood by the bar, swirling his drink. "Gentlemen. Whatever she promised you, it is merely data. I can wire $5 million to your Cayman account in 30 seconds. The lead mercenary paused. The silence in the room stretched thin, vibrating with greed. The laser sight on his rifle drifted from Min's chest to Nina's forehead. $5 million, Min repeated softly. "Each." The mercenary lowered his rifle. He looked at Nina with a cold, apologetic shrug. "Sorry, Dutchka. Business." "Secure them," the lead mech ordered. 2 men moved in fast. One slammed Nina against the wall, pinning her. The other grabbed Jawa, twisting his arms behind his back. The zip tie zipped shut with a final, ratchet sound, binding his wrist tight. "You chose the wrong side," Nina spat, struggling against the weight of the man holding her. "Money has no side," the mercenary grunted, reaching for his radio. Jawa stood perfectly still. He felt the plastic bite into his skin. He looked at the mercenary holding him, a giant of a man with a pistol holstered on his chest. Jawa closed his eyes for a fraction of a second. Then, he jerked his left hand down while shoving his thumb into his palm with sickening force. Snap! The sound of the joint dislocating was wet and sharp, audible even over the ambient hum of the building. Jawa didn't scream. He used the collapsed geometry of his broken hand to slick it right through the tight plastic loop. His hand was free. It was mangled, swelling instantly, but he didn't need it to hold a teacup. He needed it to kill. Before the mercenary could process the movement, Jawa drove his good hand into the man's throat, crushing the windpipe. As the man gagged, falling backward, Jawa snatched the pistol from his chest rig. Bang! The shot took the mercenary under the chin. Jawa rolled over the falling body, coming up with the gun leveled. The pain in his hand was white-hot, blinding, clarifying. "Get down," he roared at Nina. The room erupted. The mercenaries scattered for cover. Min dove behind the bar. It wasn't a hostage situation anymore. It was just Nina and Jawa, alone in the kill box, with every gun in the room turned against them. The office was a slaughterhouse of shattering crystal. Bullets from the mercenaries' rifles chewed through the floor-to-ceiling glass walls, sending razor-sharp shards spraying across the room. Jawa dragged Nina behind the heavy oak desk, the only cover left. He was pale, his breath hitching with every movement. His broken hand was a swollen, purple ruin, and the blood from his side was pooling on the carpet. "The air duct," he gasped, pointing to a vent near the ceiling. "It goes to the roof. The adjacent building, you can jump it." "And you?" Nina shouted over the roar of gunfire. "I am out of ammo," Jawa said, checking the slide of his stolen pistol. "And I am out of blood. I stay. I buy you 5 minutes. He grabbed her collar with his good hand, his eyes burning with a terrifying intensity. "Go. Now. Leave for both of us." Nina looked at the vent. It was small, high up. It was an escape for a rat. She looked at Jiwa. He was preparing to die. He was straightening his tie, composing himself for the end. She looked at the floor. The office was a floating masterpiece, a cantilevered glass box suspended over the main atrium of the penthouse suite. The floor beneath them was reinforced tempered glass, designed to thrill guests with a view of the marble fountain 20 feet below. "I'm done running," Nina said. Jiwa looked at her, confused. "What?" "I said I'm done running." She raised the heavy pistol she had taken from the dead mercenary. She didn't aim at the door. She aimed at the steel bolts anchoring the glass pane beneath their feet. "Nina, no!" Jiwa shouted, realizing too late what she was doing. "Together or nothing," she whispered. She pulled the trigger. Bang! 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 The stress-hardened glass didn't crack, it exploded. The structural integrity failed instantly. The floor vanished from under them. For a split second, they were weightless, suspended in a cloud of diamond dust. Then, gravity reclaimed them. They fell 20 feet, crashing down through the air, leaving the kill box behind. They hit the water of the decorative fountain below with a bone-jarring splash, the impact tearing the breath from their lungs. The mercenaries upstairs stopped firing, staring into the sudden hole in the floor, stunned by the insanity of the move. Nina surfaced first, gasping, coughing up water. She grabbed Jiwa's collar as he floated up, unconscious from the impact. She dragged him to the marble edge. They weren't safe, but they were alive, and they were together. The water in the fountain was turning pink with their blood. Nina hauled Jiwa over the marble rim, both of them gasping, shivering violently as the adrenaline spiked and crashed. "Can you walk?" she demanded, grabbing his good arm. Jiwa nodded, his face gray. "The library," he wheezed, pointing to a mahogany door across the atrium. "Behind the shelves. The servers." They stumbled across the room, leaving a wet trail on the expensive carpet. Above them, through the shattered ceiling, they could hear the mercenaries shouting, regrouping for a descent. They had seconds, not minutes. Nina kicked the library door open. Jiwa fumbled for a hidden latch behind a row of full leather-bound books. The shelf clicked and swung open, revealing a sterile, windowless room humming with the sound of cooling fans. Blue lights blinked in the darkness. Rows of black towers stood like silent sentinels. "This is it," Jiwa said, leaning heavily against the doorframe. "Every bribe. Every blackmail tape. Every dirty secret in the city. This is how the Vipers control the judges. This is how they control Leviticus." Nina looked at the blinking lights. It wasn't just data, it was chains. She ran back to the wet bar in the atrium, grabbing 3 bottles of high-proof whiskey. She returned and smashed the necks against the server racks, dousing the hot electronics in amber liquid. The smell of alcohol mixed with the ozone of overheating circuits. "If we do this," Jiwa warned, his voice steady despite his pain, "there is no leverage. The city descends into chaos. Every gang goes to war tonight." "Good," Nina said. She pulled the cheap plastic lighter from her pocket, the one she had used to cauterize his wound, the one that had started this whole journey. She flicked the wheel. The flame danced, small and yellow. "Let it burn," she whispered. She tossed the lighter onto the alcohol-soaked carpet. The fumes ignited with a whoosh, a wave of blue and orange fire rolling up the server racks. The plastic casings began to melt. Sparks showered down as the motherboards fried. The humming stopped. The blue lights died. Somewhere in the city, police files vanished. Leverage evaporated. Deaths were erased. The invisible web holding the criminal underworld together snapped. Move, Jewa said, grabbing her hand. The fire alarm finally began to scream. The roof. Now. The wind on the roof was freezing, whipping Nina's oversized hoodie around her battered frame. The fire from the server room below was already feeding smoke into the night sky, a black pillar signaling the end of an empire. They reached the helipad, but there was no helicopter. Just Min. He stood near the edge, the wind tearing at his suit. He held a silver briefcase in one hand and a heavy revolver in the other. He didn't look like a smooth operator anymore, he looked like a cornered rat. You bandit! Min screamed, his voice cracking. 50 years of history. Gone. It was never history, Jewa shouted back, stepping in front of Nina. It was leverage. And now you have nothing. I have the bearer bonds. Min yelled, hefting the silver case. 50 million. I can rebuild. He leveled the revolver at Jewa's chest. But first, I closed the account. Nina stepped out from behind Jewa. She raised the pistol she had taken from the mercenary. Her hand was shaking, not from fear, but from exhaustion. Drop the gun, Min, she shouted. Min laughed, a high, frantic sound. Or what? You shoot me. I shoot him. We all go over the edge together. He cocked the hammer. Put the gun down, Waitress. This is men's business. Nina looked at Min. She looked at the gun pointed at Jewa's heart. She looked at the silver briefcase clutched in Min's white-knuckled hand. She realized something. Min didn't care about the syndicate. He didn't care about loyalty. He only cared about the exit strategy. He shifted her aim. She didn't target his head. She targeted the case. No, Nina said. Bang. The bullet punched through the silver aluminum shell. Bang. Bang. She fired twice more into the case. The exit holes ripped open, and the wind caught the contents. Thousands of bearer bonds, sheets of paper worth millions of dollars, erupted into the air like confetti. No! Min shrieked, watching his future disintegrate into the night wind. Instinct took over. Greed overrode survival. He dropped his gun hand, reaching out desperately to grab the flying paper, his eyes following the money as it swirled over the precipice. My money! My money! He turned his back on the king. Jewa didn't hesitate. He lunged, covering the 10 feet in 2 agonized strides. He didn't punch, he didn't shoot. He simply slammed his good shoulder into Min's chest. Min's eyes went wide. He grabbed at Jewa's jacket, but his hand slipped. He tilted backward, his arms flailing, still clutching the ruined briefcase. He didn't scream. He just vanished over the edge of the roof, following his money down 40 stories to the pavement below. Jewa collapsed near the edge, gasping for air. Nina ran to him, dropping the gun. They were alone on the roof. The fire was roaring beneath them. The sirens were getting louder. The war was over. But they were trapped. The night sky was no longer black, it was a pulsing, chaotic strobe of red and blue. Below, the city was screaming. SWAT teams were breaching the lobby, and fire trucks were surrounding the base of the tower like iron beetles. Jewa leaned against the parapet, watching the empire he had built turn into a crime scene. He touched the bandages on his waist, his face a mask of soot and exhaustion. They will sweep the building, he said, his voice barely audible over the wind. They will look for the owner. They will look for the woman with the gun. Nina looked at the heavy gold signet ring on her thumb. It felt like an anchor dragging her down. It was the key to the port, the accounts, the power. It was also a death sentence. I don't want it, she said. She pulled the ring off. It left a pale band of skin on her soot-stained finger. She placed it on the concrete ledge, right next to where Min had fallen. Jewa watched her. He reached into his jacket and pulled out the stolen pistol. He ejected the magazine, cleared the chamber, and set the weapon down next to the ring. The king and the queen die on the roof, he whispered. And who goes downstairs? Nina asked. Jewa reached out and took her hand. His grip was weak, but his skin was warm. Two people who got lucky. They turned away from the edge. They entered the fire escape, merging with the few straggling maintenance workers fleeing the smoke. They descended 40 flights of concrete stairs, lungs burning, legs shaking. By the time they kicked open the exit door at street level, they were covered in ash, coughing, their faces masks of grime. They stumbled out into the freezing night air. A paramedic immediately threw a shock blanket over Nina's shoulders. A police officer waved them past the barricade, shouting, "Keep moving. Clear the area." Nobody looked at them twice. They want Mafia royalty. They want killers. They were just two more traumatized victims in a city full of them. They walked past the ambulances, past the news crews setting up their cameras, and disappeared into the shadows of the watching crowd. The motel room smelled of industrial cleaner and stale cigarettes. The neon sign outside flickered, casting a rhythmic, blood-red pulse across the peeling wallpaper. Nina sat on the edge of the sagging mattress, staring at her hands. The soot was scrubbed away, but the knuckles were raw, and the skin felt tight. She wore a t-shirt she had bought from a 24-hour gas station. It was 2 sizes too big. Jewa sat in the single armchair, his bad leg propped up on the radiator. He had redressed his wounds with supplies from a pharmacy aisle. He looked older. The arrogance of the penthouse was gone, replaced by the hollowed-out exhaustion of a man who had outlived his own funeral. "I ruined it," he said, his voice raspy in the quiet room. He didn't look at her. He looked at the floor. "You had a life. You had a home. You had a name. I took it all and gave you this." He gestured vaguely at the cheap room, at the sirens fading in the distance, at the emptiness of their pockets. "I am sorry, Nina. I should have let you walk away that first night." Nina looked up. She remembered the diner. The maple syrup smell. The endless refills. The invisibility of being a servant to a world that didn't see her. She stood up and walked over to him. She reached out and placed her hand over his mouth, silencing him. "Don't," she whispered. She pulled his hand away from his face and held it. His fingers were rough, the nails cracked, the skin fever hot. "My old life was a waiting room," she said softly. "I was just waiting to die or disappear. It wasn't peace, Jewa. It was silence." She squeezed his hand. This is loud. It hurts. We are broke. We are haunted." She leaned down, her forehead resting against his. "But I'm not invisible anymore. And neither are you." Jewa closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. The tension that had held his spine rigid for 20 years finally snapped. He slumped, not in defeat, but in surrender to the moment. "Come to sleep," she said. They lay on the lumpy mattress, fully clothed, back to back at first, then slowly turning inward as the cold of the room settled in. There was no romance in the movement, only the biological imperative of two soldiers seeking warmth in a trench. Jewa buried his face in the crook of her neck. Nina draped her arm over his chest, her hand finding his in the dark. His fingers curled around hers. His thumb traced the scar on her knuckle where the ring used to sit. They were bruised. They were fugitives. They had nothing but the breath in their lungs and the heat of each other's skin. It was enough. The screen fades to black on their entangled, scarred hands. Sometimes the only victory is waking up the next day. Thanks for taking the ride with me.